please.
Firstly, I'd say thank you very much for the coverage of Leveson, including on the discrimination against women, which I think The Guardian was the only paper to cover. And I wanted to ask, you talked about now newspapers or broadsheets and tabloids, but you also talked about journalism and the high quality of journalism and holding governments and others to account. And I wonder, rather than draw that distinction, as you say, because there's good journalism in tabloids, whether you think there's any merit to almost defining what a newspaper is, because there are some papers, for example, some of Desmond's papers, which really you have to search so hard to find any kind of news in at all, and whether there's actually a distinction between what journalism is, which is what you were alluding to, what is journalism, and defining that, and maybe taking these other publications, which are maybe not necessarily striving for the same things that you've been discussing, and put them under a different regime. Maybe you shove them under Ofcom or something like that, and then have a separate regime for papers that are really searching for the truth. I wondered what you thought about that.
Well, I think it's a very good point, and it's something that you can see Leveson is feeling towards. How do you define a journalist? How do you define, is something that was a newspaper, but he's thinking, I want to legislate for the next 30, 40 years. So how many printed newspapers are there going to be in 30 years' time? So what is this entity of a newspaper, a collective of journalists, and how do I define that or regulate for it? And I think this is why the debate is sometimes a bit old-fashioned. I mean, if you want the most, is Hugh Tomlinson still here? He's gone, so I can save his blushes. But there's a legal website called Inform, which is a fantastic blog about media law, much better than anything in any newspaper. David Alan Green, a fantastic blogger about the law. So there are real, this dismissive talk of bloggers, which I hope we're beyond. There are brilliant people who may or not call themselves journalists, doing great journalism in blog form, which are in many respects doing much better journalism than some of the papers you've mentioned. So that becomes a definitional problem. It becomes a problem that journalists are going to have to grapple with. It becomes a regulatory problem. And it's happening so fast that you can see Leveson thinking, actually, I don't know quite how I deal with this in a way that's going to have sort of permanence. But maybe in the modern world, you can't have permanence.
Hello. Hi, I am here. It's Heather Brooke. Hello.
Oh, hi, Heather.
Hey.
Oh, hello, Heather.
I'm lurking in the background.
You can clarify what you meant.
Yeah, so I'm going to clarify what I meant is that the product of a newspaper is ultimately the news, and you say that you do charge for the physical paper and also the app. But the point is you can get all of the news for free. And that's the problem that I find totally unsustainable, because that is the thing that actually is the product. That's the thing that costs money, and yet that is the exact thing that you're giving away for free. And not only is that bad in the sense that it undermines the value of what journalists do, I think, but also it undermines those other journalists and those other media organizations who do value their journalism enough to say, actually, we think people need to pay for this. Because you're giving it away for free, it makes it harder for them to charge. Yeah.
Well, the first argument is I don't think the general public has ever paid for the kind of journalism that you do. I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean, it's the argument that says that the readers of the New York Times don't pay for the Baghdad Bureau. It was Walmart that paid for the Baghdad Bureau. No paper has survived on cover price alone. In the late 18th century, advertising came to the rescue and formed the thing. And I sort of go back to my, so if you hived off this thing called news, and I obviously completely agree with you that news is at the heart of what we do, and say, here's the news, and I want you to pay for it in a British market in which the BBC, Sky News, ITV, and probably the Daily Mail and others are going to be free. I don't know of the evidence, let's put it no higher than that you would get the money that would support the kind of journalism that you do, Heather, or the Guardian's foreign operation. So At the moment, if you look at the people who have tried to put up a paywall, they have got a few £1 million or a few $1 million in revenue. The New York Times has been the most successful, but that is, you know, a monopoly paper, probably the greatest newspaper in the world, in the richest city in the world. And that seems to be as much about a sort of NPR style, I'm going to give you the money because I just want the New York Times to exist. And it's also about propping up the weekend print subscription. But even with the New York Times, which has been the most successful, it's nowhere near paying the bills for the kind of journalism that you're describing. The Times of London, which has a complete paywall, again, it's nowhere near the answer that you want. So it's all very well to say you're
readers. I don't think idealism is disappearing at all. I hope not. I think my editors and the vast majority of staff look upon our role as playing a very important part in society. They take an idealistic view. They see newspapers for which they work having influence at all levels, whether it be socially or politically or even in sports. They take that influence very seriously. Sometimes they may overestimate it, just as I believe politicians vastly do, but nevertheless, they want to do good with it. Rupert Murdoch. Thanks very much, Alan.